Welcome to IB Unplugged, a Cognitive podcast for IBDP educators that tackles your submitted challenges and questions by connecting you with experts and peers who share their ideas and stories from real classrooms. Whether you're a seasoned educator or new to the IB world, each bi-weekly episode and guest aims to equip you with practical tips and positive inspiration, helping you teach with more confidence, creativity, and joy. So whether you're walking your dog or commuting to school, hit play and join a community of educators ready to learn, laugh, and thrive in your IB journey.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of IB Unplugged. This one was coming to you from the IB Global Conference in The Hague.
Yeah, we were super excited to actually do a live version of our podcast, and this was taking place as one of the conference sessions. So some of you were able to join us. We had a really cool breakout room and a whole space together, and we got to talk with Matt Glanville, talk about the future of assessment, specifically digital assessment, kind of breaking some myths apart and talking about the advantages of getting to know what people know when it comes to the assessments themselves and that strategy with the IB.
Yeah, it was so great to have Matt there. I think one of my takeaways of the conference is how popular that man is.
He is the global conference.
He couldn't go from the coffee bar to a table without at least 4 people wanting to talk to him. I've never seen anything like it. It was impressive.
There was somebody who came by the Cognitive booth and looked at we had like the poster promoting it, right? And they're like, "Oh, you got that rock star." And he's like, "Ooh, I've reached rock star status." I'm like, "Who's John Patton?" I'm talking about Matt Glanville. It's like, "Oh yeah, fair enough."
Exactly. And so we tried to make it look like kind of our comfortable podcast studio. We stole furniture from the hallway. We set everything up. It was nice to do it live. It was nice to see all the faces. Some people have been watching the podcast in the past, so thank you to those of you who acknowledged that. We appreciate it. And hopefully we have some new people here too.
Yeah, definitely. So, this episode, while it was a live recording at the Global Conference, we're really excited to be able to share it with you here as something that you can come back to and revisit time and again. And for those of you who weren't with us at the Global Conference, you're going to hear some really great stuff with regard to what the IB is doing to innovate assessment, to get a better idea of what students know and can do, and why digital assessments is something that we really shouldn't be too scared of, but actually pretty excited about. So we're really excited for you to be here. Thanks again for always joining us here at IB Unplugged, and we hope that you're able to take away some great stuff from this episode here, talking with Matt Glanville and the future of assessment in the IB. All right, well, let's dive in. And for those of you here with us live, and for those of you listening later on, welcome to IB Unplugged. We're super excited to have you here, and we are super excited to have Matt Glanville back with us on the show, this time talking a little bit more about the future of assessment, specifically digital innovation, AI, and the evolving role of educators. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me back.
Absolutely, yes. So let's kind of kick things off right away, and let's just start with this first segment. We want to talk about the transition to digital-first assessment. We know that's coming down the pipeline in the next few years. And I wonder if you could let's just start with what are the common misconceptions when it comes to digital assessment?
So I think the most important one to attract is to say it's not just about multiple choice. It's not just about short answers. A lot of the digital assessments people have seen in the past have been those sort of easy auto-generated assessments. Where the IB wants to go with this is actually to have really meaningful assessments, not just as good as we've got now, but pushing the boundaries beyond that. So it's, first of all, paper first, and then to really think about how can we use digital to be interactive? How can we make sure it works well? So misconception 1, it's all multiple choice. Misconception 2, you do it at home. No, we can do it in example. Misconception 3 is probably that digital assessments are less meaningful, and they can be more meaningful.
Yeah, I think there's so much potential and there's a lot of exciting things to change, but I'm wondering from your opinion, what are the pieces that you want to hold on to? What is we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing?
Absolutely. So again, it's really about that opportunity to express what you want in an assessment. either your favourite bit or your least favourite bit are those long answer questions where you really get to show what you understand in the way you understand it. And that's the bit that we really need to make sure we keep as we move to digital assessment.
I'm sure we'll get into it, but you just mentioned that you can get a little bit more meaning from the assessment, not just the traditional sort of form. Can you give us just a teaser in terms of what that means? What are you talking about when you say we can get more from a digital assessment than the typical assessments now?
So here's a piece of paper. It's got the words on it. It's not going to say anything to me. Once I have a digital assessment, if I pick up my phone, I can start getting it to ask me things back. It can have optionality. It can have video. All these things that I can't do with just a blunt piece of paper. So there's a quicker teaser about what we can do.
Okay. You're kind of hinting at adaptive assessment kind of stuff possibly?
Well, interactive first. We'll come to adaptive assessment definitely later. But even if it's not adaptive, that interactability to be able to say something and for it to ask you, oh, that was interesting. What more do you think about that?
Yeah. And we talked about it being in an exam hall. From your perspective, what kinds of support, what kinds of infrastructure need to be in place for digital assessment to be successful in all different types of IB schools?
So again, the first thing is don't be afraid, be excited. You all use laptops frequently and they don't explode very often. So a lot of where schools are frightened is around some of the logistic elements of it. And actually, we need to make sure that we've got the backups. We can cope if the internet drops out. We've got battery life for laptops, which is longer than nearly all IB exams. Those are the kind of things that we can do. It can be bring your own device. So all of this stuff is true. Also need to think about that sort of lockdown facility to make sure that the computers aren't being used elsewhere. So you can't just go and surf the internet. We've got to make sure the computers are secure in that sense. And we do that through the assessment. They're the big issues here. It's logistics, but we've run MYP exams for many years. It works. Schools can adapt, but it does feel like a big change.
Yeah. We spoke about this briefly before, but there's also the massive advantage of, especially for a DP coordinator, where I don't have to be walking around like keeping the exams under lock and key and then like carefully bring them into the room, make sure I bring them back because it's all unlocked digitally and then of course locked down when they're done, right?
And you know the exams are going to be there. You're not worrying about the post, not sending it. And also you know that they jump back the other way. You don't need to worry about posting it and it getting lost in the post. So there are huge benefits to the logistical side of things. Also just some of the invigilator tools that potentially you can use to be able to support your students and see if there are problems coming up, if it's all connected up. So there are big logistical advantages, although that's not the real reason I'm excited by exams.
Well, I mean, it is pretty clear that you are excited nonetheless about this move and where we're going. And I guess it kind of fundamentally comes down to this idea of like, what are we doing when we're talking about assessment? What's the purpose of assessment itself? I know that obviously this is the role you've had at the IB for a while. You're a big believer in what we get to do here. And I know there's some people out here I've been able to have conversations with already where we're kind of thinking, you know, is AI coming in, kind of breaking assessment? What are we doing with this thing? What's the purpose of it at all? So I wonder if we could just start, like, do you believe the purpose of assessment, the IB, has shifted a little bit when we go to digital assessments? Or what's kind of the main role of assessment still?
So the fundamental role of assessment is to understand what the student can do. And in the formative space, in your classrooms, that's so you can understand how to teach your student better. And in the summative space, which is where I tend to sit, it's about being the least bad way of differentiating between students.
It's a great line for your resume.
I mean, I do honestly recognise the challenges and the flaws with a sort of summative assessment system, but also I know that if you're going to identify which are the best students to progress, it's a lot better than all the other methods that have inherent biases. I spend many nights worrying about fairness and comparability and how to remove barriers. I know that interviews obviously don't spend the same length of time to make it happen. So it's a really strong thing. But one of the limitations around paper exams is what we can assess. And so with the digital, can we assess more of what we value? As an IB, I always try to focus on assessing what's important, not what's easy to assess, but I can do an even better job of that with digital assessment.
Can you tell us more about what you mean when you say what's important, what we value?
So if we think about why are we educating our young people? What's the end goal? How do we want them to move? Now, is it to be able to regurgitate loads of facts? Yes. I respectfully disagree with you as the principle behind that. Is it about being able to understand and evaluate things? And again, regurgitating facts I can assess very easily using multiple choice and short answer. Their ability to form a coherent argument, to evaluate a situation, to express different viewpoints in a very sort of TOK kind of way. That's where I think we're truly trying to achieve with an IB education. And that's where I think that having that interactivity is really good. The best IB lessons are those where the teacher and the students are talking, both to the teacher and to each other, and exploring things together. That's where I really sort of get a buzz out in the classrooms, and I'd love to see a little bit of that buzz coming into the exam space as well.
Yeah. We have a question from somebody in the audience, and I know we've previously talked about the MYP e-assessments, and they wanted to kind of know what are the similarities, what are the differences between what you hope the DP exams, digital assessments, to be compared to what the MYP ones are now?
So the biggest difference is that the MYP e-assessments are optional. So we were able to create something that was really forward-looking and exciting and using as many of the opportunities we had, whereas with the DP, we're going to need to run some paper alongside digital. So during these early years of the transition, I've got to be comparable between the paper and the digital. So unlike the MYP where I could start with a big bang of really exciting stuff, I'm going to have to be careful as I run through. When we eventually reach the point of all of DP exams being on screen, whether in a subject or across the board, then that's when I can start to really build on the MYP experience. I mean, the MYP's, believe it or not, sort of 10 years old now, so technology and opportunity has moved on, but that's a good blueprint for the kind of thing I'd love to be able to do.
That's kind of the idea with then starting with more of the language subjects first, then rolling out a little bit more to the complicated maths and sciences stuff, right?
Absolutely. Most students use word processing for many of their tasks in literature, so moving that on screen isn't a challenge. Whereas once you get to the sciences and maths, that's where we need to manage some of the more complicated transitions. And that's also where we need to give schools the most opportunity to upskill their students so they're used to working in that way. An exam shouldn't be a different experience to your experience in the student's classroom.
Sure. I mean, another question from the audience that actually fits right now is, to what extent should we be concerned about maybe a handwriting decline or a loss? Because we're kind of moving everything digital, especially given considerable research showing the link between handwriting, cognition. What are kind of your thoughts in that space?
This is a really interesting element for me. I know throughout my business life, I've never submitted a handwritten piece or report to my chief exec. Therefore...
We just saw a big gesture from the audience, by the way, that was like, that's what I've been saying.
Excellent. I should be looking that way more than looking at the pair of you. Yes, absolutely. So I think now there are advantages, as you say, cognitively, to be connecting the handwriting to the learning process. And I don't want to get rid of that, but we do need to prepare students for the future. And I really don't think it's fair to make kids write for 3 hours in the history exam. That needs to be a thing of the past.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's something that we've also talked about, of this idea of the assessment shouldn't be this alternate universe that is this weird exam hall where suddenly everybody has their exam books and their hands are all cramping, where a lot of you said that you use Cognity, you're using a platform, and if you've used our exam style questions, it's like, okay, now everyone stop using the platform and get your paper out, and we're going to separate everything. That ecosystem you're talking about is so powerful if your learning and your assessment and everything is all happening in the same way, and then it's stopping the cognitive, I would say, barriers of, I'm used to doing everything on my computer. I'm used to having an either adaptive or interactive experience, and now I just need to sit here with a plain piece of paper and start writing.
Absolutely. And I don't want anybody to feel scared that suddenly their classroom has got to sort of change completely overnight, because I know there's a big change there. But also, we know that children full stop, come in home, they use digital technology, that's their life now. And then they come into schools, and sometimes it feels like it's sort of, I'll politely say 20 years out of date. I could probably say more than that. So we want our education to reflect the real world, and we need our assessments to reflect how education works.
Well, and to that end, then, as we kind of keep thinking about rethinking the purpose of assessment itself, how do you feel like assessment can better reflect learning process, not just the outcomes?
So, that's part of where the gap between formative and summative come in. If I'm trying to measure somebody's achievements at the end of their course, then that's what I'm interested in, to give the sort of if I'm measured on how much improvement I've made on learning the flute, then that's not really fair to give me the same grade as somebody who can actually play the flute, even though for me the ability to make a sound out of it is great progress. Having said that, with that assessment as learning and as part of the experience, we really should be focusing on asking students to reflect during their assessment process. It becomes part of their thinking. And again, digital can really help with that. There's that little bit more adaptability. It can offer feedback. It can ask similar questions when the student needs it again. It can support that learning process. And it also can test that learning process in a way that paper can't. One of the things we're trying to do with one of our pilots is saying, okay, here's a situation. Now we're going to change that situation. How do you adapt it? Which, of course, is exactly how the real world works. You think you've got it sorted, then somebody throws you a curveball, and suddenly you've got to react to that.
There's no teacher here who's ever had that experience.
Are you an IB educator wanting to improve your practice and needing just a bit more support getting there? Have you ever wanted to learn more about a specific aspect of the DP program or ask a question to an educational theorist about a specific IB aspect? IB Unplugged is the place for you. Simply visit cognity.com/IB Unplugged to submit your question to us and have your question explored in more detail in an upcoming episode. And now, back to the show.
You kind of hinted at it there with regard to how do I evaluate this student kind of comparatively against this other student. And I think it really brings about this tension of how do we reconcile high stakes external assessment with the goal of meaningful formative learning, school culture, IB mission. You know, we're kind of in this balance between the two where I feel like throughout the DP program or really all IB programs, we're mission driven, we're doing all this cool stuff to build an inquiry. And then we kind of hit almost a ceiling of, well, now it's high stakes and we've got to get into universities and that sort of stuff. How are we navigating that now, and how do you see digital assessments in that space?
I mean, you're absolutely right. And one of the challenges I've got is what gets assessed is what gets taught. So one of my duties is to try and make sure what I'm asking to be you when I assess you is actually what we value. Again, coming back to that problem-solving testing as opposed to knowledge recall. So if you've spent your entire sort of revision learning how to problem solve, that's probably what I wanted from the IB education anyway. That is harder to assess reliably, and where I can use perhaps digital assessment is to be able to give people comparable situations but also adjust to their own situations a little bit more. There's a whole range of access and inclusion where maybe the IA can change the reading age to meet the student if that's not what's important, rather than it being the one thing, as well as there's sort of blinded obvious things like font size and font color. And do you know what? I can make things larger now I'm getting a little bit older, or a little bit. Don't get me started on that. So I think that's where we've got great opportunity to start measuring those things that are really important. The C word, collaboration's another really good challenge, because currently I can't ensure that every student has the same collaborative experience to try and build on that. maybe in a digital world with a touch of AI thrown in, I can give them the same group to work with. Therefore, I can accurately measure how well they've coped with that group and be comparable across students.
Mm-hmm. I love that, because I think that in a lot of sessions, other podcast episodes, there's been a lot of talk about assessment versus skills and skills-based learning, and all of the things that the teachers, actually want to be teaching. And
of course,
it feels like there's a lot of sentiment of the assessment blocking them from going deeper into those kind of things like collaboration, because that hasn't been. So it seems like that pulling those skills, pulling in the ATLs, really actually connecting it all is one of the goals of having this digital assessment.
Absolutely. I think that's a really, really important point, that it means that we can start to assess some of the things we've never been able to do because it requires that interaction that you can't get from a piece of paper. Although also I need to say that not everything that's important should be measured. Caring and empathy is incredibly important. I don't think we should ever grade it.
Just a moment ago, you mentioned with a touch of AI, and I kind of felt in the room, people go, whoa, what do you mean when you say touch of AI? Can we talk about opportunities and risks and governance? And, I think we've gone to a few sessions throughout the conference thus far where AI seems quite promising, but then I know I was part of one yesterday. There's been a couple of sessions where it's been mentioned. And so I guess, I want to step into it almost with a little bit of trepidation, if you will, but talk to us about that. What are the opportunities? What are the risks when we're talking about AI and assessment?
Okay, so I think, first of all, a lot of the conversation about AI in assessment has been, students are cheating with it. And throughout all my presentations, I've tried to really say, actually, no, let's go beyond that. Let's recognize AI exists out there and see what it does. But AI to support learning is great. AI to replace learning is not so great. In the assessment space, we can also use it to be more interactive and more responsive.
This is a collaborative thing you're mentioning.
This is the collaborative thing. This could be, if it's explain a concept to a fellow student, a great exercise in the classroom. You can't do it in a paper exam, but with AI in a digital world, you can do that. You can say to the student, that's a very interesting thing. What more can you tell me? You can prompt the student to give their full opportunity, and ultimately getting to maybe something around that language acquisition. You're actually interacting with an avatar rather than having a very sort of stifled. Yeah. So there's one way to allow a student to be responded to and thing. The other way you mentioned was adaptive assessment. So at the moment, because my assessments have to cover everything, for an average student, the first third is just an opportunity for them to make a mistake and lose a mark. The middle is where they're really showing what they can do. And the last half is the bit that they cry because they can't do anything and come out of the exam feeling dreadful. How much better if we could just focus on that middle part? And there are ways we can do that at the moment. We could ask the teacher to guess in advance which bit of the question they could do, but so much better if we can adapt the assessment as the student goes along. Now, there's a lot of work to be done with the communities to make people confident that that's really giving everybody a fair experience. Because at the moment, face validity, everyone gets the same exam. That's fair to an extent.
Well, and from that same exam, you've got to be able to distinguish your 6s from 5s and 7s, and sometimes it comes down to just one small bit, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it can be, yes. We need to make sure that all the questions are doing what they should be doing, and that's a challenging thing to set up in advance, but we could do it so much better. So that's the real student facing. And there's a whole pile of stuff behind the scenes using AI to support authors mark better, create better exam papers as inspiration. Using AI to better quality check papers, using AI to support and quality check marking. I'm not suggesting we get rid of human markers at all.
Yeah, but what's the examiner in this space then?
Yes, so we're doing a lot of research at the moment around, and not just IB, across the sector, around how effective AI is at marking student work. The initial responses are looking pretty positive, but There's no way I think that society's ready for us to have pure AI marking yet. So certainly my vision is we have human markers mark it once, we then have AI marking, and then the IB can say, well, yeah, that agrees, or that one disagrees. So can we give that to another human marker to decide whether it was the AI or the human being that was wrong?
So it's kind of a bridge between a principal moderator or principal examiner in the main exam. Do I understand?
Well,
right?
It's about identifying those rare occasions when the human examiner makes a mistake. And they do very occasionally, but we can get them.
Yeah, I think that's been a theme in some of the sessions I've been sitting in this weekend about the partnership element of it's not all going to AI, it's not all staying human, but how do we make it a really great partnership? And I think that, there's been a lot of positive studies on being able to get really good results from AI marking, but I think that the examiners, some of them have been examining for 15, 20 years. There's that element I think doesn't go away either.
Absolutely. It's sometimes called human in the loop, but yes, we absolutely need to keep that. And again, moving slightly sideways, I think that's also really important in that teaching environment as well.
Yeah.
AI can support teachers, but they mustn't replace teachers.
Exactly.
It can be great for dealing with that class of 30 where you've got one or two you need to just pat on the head, but you still need to do some of that marking to gain the insight for that student.
You were talking about sort of the student-facing AI bit, but there was a whole bunch of stuff going on, on the back end of it, I guess, or behind the scenes, if you will. And we got a question from our audience here, which is, what approaches are you using to green assess your use of AI to have minimum use but maximum impact?
That's an amazingly great question. My principle here is that we only use AI when we need to use AI. And I hear a lot of people blurring it. So multiple choice marking, we don't need AI. We can do that automatically. Actually, looking at school results or examiner marking to make sure that it's looking okay, I don't need to use AI for that. I can use standard statistical processes to do that. Mm-hmm. Marking an extended essay, well, actually, that's where I really think the AI is needed. Providing that interaction for the student, that's where I think artificial intelligence is really needed. So that's my approach at the moment. It's about sort of using it when it's going to really add value to the assessment process or the student experience.
Do you mind expanding on that a little bit with regard to the extended essay and the AI sort of examining there? Because I know one of the things we want to look into is how can assessment design itself evolve to be more AI resilient in certain spaces? And then at the same time, as we've spoken about already, use AI to help bring out more from the student as well. So I wonder, as you mentioned that with the EE, I just went, what does that mean?
So the context I actually meant it was that I can't create a simple program to mark extended essay. You've got to look at the whole argument together, the whole essay together to understand how all the bits link up. And that's something which a human being does well, AI can do well, and sort of more linear marking processes can't do well. But I think you're invited me to think about how does the extended essay still exist in a world where AI... Well, fundamentally, we still need our young people to be able to be interested in the topic, work with that topic, examine in that topic. Mm-hmm. This is where the role of the teacher or supervisor comes in, because yes, a student could just ask ChatGPT to write their extended essay for them, but to what end? They've learned nothing. That's using AI to replace. So we tell students how you can use it. Yeah, it's great for investigating. Thinking about the different questions. Great. Choosing it. No. Getting a sense of what the sources look at. Yep, that's a good use. Summarizing it and telling you what they say. No, you've got to go and read it for yourself. Mm-hmm. And good teachers will know, they'll be working alongside the students, so they'll see that, and also they'll be able to have that conversation with the student at the end. And if a student really understands what they've written and the whys, and they can answer questions about it, then that indicates what they've learnt. A number of people have talked to me about, should we have an oral exam at the end of extended essay? And that's a really interesting way of thinking about this going forward. Mm-hmm. But I know oral exams put a huge burden on schools. So at the moment, I'm saying that's a great tool for the school to use if they've got any doubt. Mm-hmm. But maybe in the future, we could use AI to run those oral exams for us. So it's no longer a great burden. So
that was such a hint tone of voice.
It was such a worried.
Yeah.
I'm Alex. I'm an MYP coordinator at Broderville Middle School, and one small change that I made in my teaching that had a big impact was a focus on documenting the learning process in my units in different ways so that students could monitor how they were doing and reflect and see their progress, and so that I could see it constantly as well.
No, I think that's really interesting. I think that that's a really great way of explaining how we can kind of move past we shouldn't leave academic integrity, which we've talked about also, but it's a way of saying this conversation goes beyond just are people cheating or not. It's how are we actually doing that? And then I think that ties into assessment literacy as a bigger conversation. How do we talk about assessment literacy beyond just exam prep? And yeah, I want to hear kind of your thoughts on what some of the most powerful things that coordinators and school leaders can bring back to their schools to help in that culture of assessment literacy.
So, I mean, the most important thing is to actually talk to people about it and talk to the students about it. We all know that getting students to evaluate each other's work is a really powerful way of helping them learn. But you can also use that as an opportunity to talk about what good assessment means. It's always great fun to ask students to come up with really stupid ways of assessing important things. And that'll be a good, fun, entertaining 20 minutes of a lesson. And you can sort of print, yes, how would we assess, I don't know, whether something is an elephant or not? Oh, we'd use a multiple choice test for the elephant. And if it can answer it, it probably isn't. But there's opportunities like that. And then it wouldn't be me if I didn't say, also talk about the validity chain, which, again, apologies, I think it's in every single one of my presentations. But think about the elements that make a valid assessment: the reliability, the fairness, the comparability, the manageability. All of these elements have to come together, and you can get some really good conversations going, and you can also then start applying that to your own school experiences. There's no point in having a formative assessment that is strongly biased. So if I stick the instructions on what to do 6 feet above the desks, all the tall kids will be able to do the work, but all the short kids will have to cheat and get somebody else to read it for them. Silly exercises like that just, again, entertain the kids, but also get the parents and the teachers thinking about it.
I like that a lot because it helps students, and for that matter, as you said, parents, really understand a little bit more of the purpose of why we are trying to assess and why there does need to be a space for a more nuanced, I guess, appreciation of how students are learning, right? And to really understand what they're doing. And so far, I mean, within the conversation we've been having, I can just tell so much of this and the forward-thinking movements we're having in the next few years are all about trying to just understand what the students know a lot better. For me, that seems like a pretty encouraging thing, especially as we're in where students could maybe falsify what they know, or they could use other ways of showing that. But instead, it seems like we're moving in a direction where we really know what students actually know. And it sounds like that's kind of the main point of what's going on, right?
I'm going to be naughty and say it's what students understand rather than what students know, or it's what students can do, but not what they know.
All right, okay. Yeah. So we've kind of covered it, I guess, with regard to AI supporting teaching and learning with assessment. But I guess, is there anything else that you feel like we can use AI meaningfully to support teaching and learning in the context of assessment and not distort the learning in the context of assessment?
So again, the first thing to say is that teaching's a really hard job, and you spend hours doing lots of different things. let's use AI to remove some of those tasks so you can spend more time doing the things that you enjoy and that make you a great teacher. And that's not a one-size-fits-all. If you're a teacher who loves doing lesson prep, do your lesson prep. If you're a teacher who loves writing reports, you're very strange. But use it in the way that you need to. But also, I think the real big thing here is we've got to help students understand the ethical and best uses of AI. It's not going away. It's going to be part of their lives for a long time. We already see situations where students are using it in ways that worry me, as they're sort of best buddy sort of apps, and you see them spiraling down. Yeah. Let's explain to them why that's not the best idea. Let's help them understand that knowing something because the AI told you is based on it. AI knowledge is sort of a mob view of sort of what does the majority of people think. Yeah. But you can also go and ask somebody who's an absolute expert in something, or somebody who has a particular viewpoint. And again, it's very IB, isn't it? Other people with different views can also be right. So go and learn about it. Yeah. Listen to people. And I think that's where we can really help students use AI responsibly and beneficially in the future. And also teachers and schools and assessment organizations.
Yeah. I think that ties in really nicely to another question that we were asked from the audience. In when you use AI in assessment, there's an inevitable bias that exists within AI. How do you, especially in an international school context, how do you address that bias and kind of address that conversation with students as well?
One of the huge challenges of being an international organization is that cultural experiences in different parts of the world. My nice clean version of this is, if you write about a greenhouse, will you get everybody recognizing that you mean a house that's painted green, right, or will some people think you mean a house made out of glass? And that's true across the world. So we've got to be careful. We set up our exam teams in order to make sure that we don't have those cultural blind spots. Mm-hmm. And that's where using AI in that space, we're aware of it, we'll watch for it, we'll spot it, we'll consider it, we'll think, where's the gaps here? Yeah. And then ditto, when we're using it for marking, we will make sure that the way we train it is based on an awareness of the bias. AI itself isn't biased. The evidence and information it's learnt from is biased. Right. And so, but that does mean that if you teach the AI based on a better cohort of information, for example, a pile of history exam papers that we've put together for it, you can be careful of that bias.
Yeah, because I guess you've already had to, in a way, teach the examiners about it, because every examiner is going to have their own bias as well. It's going to be easier to mark examples that are coming from experiences that are coming from you as well. So it's a similar notion.
Absolutely, yes. We've had to work with our examiners to help them understand. Now, a lot of our examiners are IB teachers, so that was a very easy conversation. Yeah. But being able to reflect and recognize yourself when a context feels familiar and when the context feels unfamiliar is a really important element of it, both as examining, both used for assessments, but also, again, as a student learning about it. One of the positive elements of AI bias is it's a really good starting point for getting young people to realize that not everything they read from ChatGPT is true, and then maybe not everything they hear on social media is true. Right. Maybe they need to be that critical listener, that critical receiver of information wherever they get it from.
Wow. So, I mean, obviously we're kind of coming to the close of the episode right now, I guess, as it would be. And what I'm taking away is that there's lots of great possibilities here in the digital assessment space. It sounds like we're really finding a good way to know what the student understands. There we go. Yes. And it sounds like we're working with AI in ways that are going to help enhance what the student knows and help what we know about them as well, without all the possible negative downsides to it as well. And I'm sure there's a much larger conversation we could have in that space, and maybe we'll come back for another one. But as we come to a close, I guess, of this episode, if you had one bold change to how assessment works in the IB over the next 5 years, is it just digital assessment, or is there something more?
Digital assessment is the opportunity to make that change, because what I really want is I want assessments that are interactive for the student. And I can't do that with a piece of paper. I will eventually be able to do that with digital assessment.
Matt, thank you so much for joining us for the show. Thank you, everybody here. Please help us in thanking Matt.
Thank you all.
IB Unplugged is a Cognity podcast hosted by John Patton and Courtney Marlene and produced by Catalina Gaffney. Be sure to subscribe or follow and share with your fellow IB educators. If you'd like to submit a topic, request, or question, please do so on cognity.com/IB Unplugged. Let's keep the conversation going and support each other in teaching with confidence, creativity, and joy. See you next time.